Loved ones, colleagues, even strangers, they're honoring EMS Lieutenant Alison Russo, who lived her life helping others from New York City to Long Island.
The man who police say stabbed her to death in an unprovoked attack has now been charged in her murder, and tributes have been pouring in all day for Lieutenant Russo.
What's going on, y'all? Eric Moser here with Covert Conversations. Thanks again for joining me. Once again, another somber topic, y'all, and another time we find ourselves in New York addressing some of the issues that go on there. And I'm going to take somewhat of a different turn today to talk about this matter here. I want to discuss some of the issues that, of course, first and foremost, let me back up real quick. I will be showing you portions of the actual event. And just a heads up, it is very disturbing. I have blurred out the actual stabbing, so you will not see that. And I don't want to get any strikes from YouTube, but I do plan on showing you what led up to it but once again, the actual stabbing incident will be blurred out because I know that this video will be taken down, or I'll get multiple strikes, or YouTube will just take it down overall. But I want to share with you some of the details involved in this incident. And then I want to examine it from a different perspective because the suspect is believed to have been or believed to be mentally ill. And so I want to address the issue of mental illness in our current society today, where there's such a push to normalize mental illness or push to minimize the severity of it. So I want to highlight a few statistics and data that it took me a while to get to. Once you get past multiple pages on Google and you get down to the brass tacks, and I came up with some pretty decent data. And I'm a big advocate of self-defense, an individual being able to have the ability to defend themselves. So I'll be addressing that issue as well. But first and foremost, again, I'm about to share the video. It is disturbing. I have blurred out, I've concealed the actual stabbing, so you will not see it. But you'll be able to see how quickly things went down and how she was basically caught off guard. And some of and what was going on around her, which can be equally as disturbing. So let's jump right in. Now, this is Miss Allison. This is Alison Russo, Lieutenant Alison Russo, right here at the gate. Report was that she was going to get something to eat. She was on her lunch break or something like that, because it's approximately 2-something in the afternoon. And watch how quickly this goes down. Again, it is blurred out.
That's all. Nobody said you're not getting a video. It just said slow down. But you just want it right now.
That's the suspect again. Yeah, that's the end of the video. I want to go back and make a few notes from early on when it goes down, just before it goes down here. Let's see the size comparison between the suspect and Allison. See if I can get there quickly. And how quickly she was caught off guard. Let's note these two things. First of all, you see he's got, what, at least shoulder height, head height, a foot on her. And who knows how much weight. She was 61 years old. And this guy, when I'll show you a video of him being taken into custody, where he's heavy, and you can see in the video with him running down the street, he's not a small guy. So physically speaking, she had basically no chance to stop him. And if you see the fully unedited video, when she's knocked to the ground, it would appear that she must have struck her head because she seemed dazed. But at the same time, he immediately begins stabbing her. Like almost before she even hits the ground, he begins stabbing her. And it just shows the heinous nature of how it went down. It was just completely savage. It was animalistic. It was like something you would see in a horror movie, like honestly. And again, I'm not going to show it again, but it's out there. I found this on Twitter. Sadly, it's out there. But to some degree, I feel like it's necessary for us to see things like this, for us to be able to see the actual events so we can see exactly how quickly things went down. Another issue that I bring up oftentimes is situational awareness. Now, it is impossible to be completely alert to everything that's going on around you 24/7. It's impossible, especially in a city like New York, where you have it's hustle and bustle. You have people walking all the time, 8 million people there. The odds of you being able to pay attention and to everything that's happening around you, you go nuts because it's just a physical and mental impossibility. But you have to do the best that you can. And that street right there, for instance, and I know at times if you're living in a large city, a city with a lot of activity, you probably can get to the point to where you're a bit jaded and you start to let your guard down and you develop a certain level of complacency. Even in law enforcement, complacency sets in for a lot of officers as time goes on. I believe that there's some data out there that says, statistically speaking, most officers that end up getting killed on duty, I believe it's over 8 years, possibly around the 10-year mark, where the officers, is a time period where most officers are the ones who get killed on duty. And that could be because after a while, you believe in your own mind that you've seen everything and that you're prepared. And that's when you can get caught off guard. The sad reality of this the even sadder reality of this whole thing was that Lieutenant Alison Russo, she's the EMT with the NYFD, New York Fire Department, 61 years old, and she had 6 months left to retire. 6 months. 6 months left before she was going to retire. That's truly, truly sad. And man, awesome comments already, y'all. I appreciate y'all throwing comments in, Lon and Latina. I appreciate y'all, and I definitely plan on getting to those. So now let's jump over to. I want to share some additional content with you. I want to share some information to you. Hold on one second. Wasn't trying to show that. I want to share some information with you from. Here we go. I want to show this news clip with you, or the video that I showed as we opened up, which goes into a bit more detail of what's going on, or what went down, I should say.
Colleagues, even strangers, they're honoring EMS Lieutenant Alison Russo, who lived her life helping others from New York City to Long Island.
The man who police say stabbed her to death in an unprovoked attack has now been charged in her murder, and tributes have been pouring in all day for Lieutenant Russo. FDNY members draped purple and black bunting at EMS Station 49 in Astoria, Queens.
And then a somber salute as her casket was carried from the medical examiner's office to a funeral home in Comac, Long Island. CBS 2's Jenna DeAngelis has the latest tonight from Astoria.
I just want to add this, y'all. As a person who has lost more than a few friends on duty, that's one of the hardest things to deal with. And that's another thing that's often overlooked in the line of duty for officers. I'm trying to think. It's been at least 4 or 5 people that I've known throughout the course of my career that died, and I've known many that died just from various reasons, but when they die on duty or something similar or tragically, man, there's nothing quite like that. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to fully comprehend. But sadly, it's the nature of the beast, the nature of the job, unfortunately.
Maurice and Christine, we're right near the scene and where the suspect lives. Police have been here all day. Sources say waiting on a search warrant, hoping to recover the murder weapon. In the meantime, neighbors have been coming here all day to honor a woman who devoted her life to helping others. One by one, people placed flowers at a growing memorial for FDNY Lieutenant Alison Russo. Many of them strangers who felt compelled to pay their respects.
It's the least I could do, because I'm sure if I needed her help, she would have been there for me.
A person who spent her life helping and saving other people, there's like no words.
Earlier Friday, her FDNY family gathered at EMS Station 49, draping black and purple bunting and fighting back tears.
A heart of gold. She was here for the whole station. She made sure that we were all okay.
But she was tragically taken from them Thursday afternoon. The 61-year-old was on duty and left the station to get food nearby. She reached 41st Street and 20th Avenue and was stabbed more than 20 times.
Keep playing it in my head over and over and over again.
Jimmy Orseris was on his scooter when he saw the attack. Both he and police say at the hands of this man, 34-year-old Peter Zizopoulos.
Now you can see this. He's not a small dude. I'm not saying he's physically fit or anything like that. But if you have someone who's mentally ill with a edged weapon, with a knife, coming at a small framed woman who's caught off guard, that's not a good combination. It's not going to have a good outcome.
I realized he was stabbing her. Knife in his hands, and he's looking like the look of nothing in his face. And just as I'm screaming at him, he gets up and just charges after me.
An onlooker chased after Zizopoulos, who then ran into his apartment near the scene. He barricaded himself until eventually surrendering to police. Here's what we know from police sources about his past. He had one prior interaction with the NYPD in 2018. Cops were called to his home because he was acting erratically, making physical threats. He was classified as an emotionally disturbed person and taken to the hospital. We're told he has a history of schizophrenia. His alleged actions here, robbing so many of a hero who lived to serve. Russo was a World Trade Center first responder, a 25-year veteran of the FDNY, and a volunteer with the Huntington Community First Aid Squad.
I think that giving to others and service was just really her biggest love in life.
Honored in her town, Huntington, and Comac, where community members lined the street leading to the funeral home. So many left grappling with this great loss, especially her family.
And remember her for the hero that she was, because that's truly who she was, and she died doing what she loved.
Funeral arrangements have not yet been announced, but are expected soon, where family and friends will say their final goodbyes. In Astoria, Queens, Jenna DeAngelis, CBS 2 News.
Man. Yeah, it's yeah, Latin, you made a good point. Like, I'm not sure what her height was, but you look at how he towered over, it seemed like everyone else around. Either they're extremely short or he's got some fair amount of height on him. And you figure, probably 260 at least? Yeah, that's not good. That's definitely not good. And it was almost as if there was no chance for her to come out on top of that, unfortunately. And again, you're dealing with the mentally ill. Again, you're dealing with someone who is suffering from mental illness. And just like a lot of other topics that we discussed in our current society, there is a push from certain people with a specific political persuasion to minimize mental illness or destigmatize. And to some degree, I get it, because people automatically assume that if someone is wrestling or struggling with mental illness, then that means that they are automatically, they should have all their rights taken away. And I think that's ridiculous. But I do think that depending on the severity of it, Because what you hear nowadays is the vast majority of people with mental illness aren't dangerous. And I agree with that. Or mentally ill people are more likely to be victimized than those who aren't mentally ill. And I agree with that. So what do you do with those? So I think if you have such a rapid push to destigmatize the mentally ill, ultimately what you end up doing is you open the door for this type of thing, because those people who are out there who are struggling with mental health issues oftentimes aren't getting the treatment that they need. And many times, some of them aren't even capable of taking care of themselves. So they need someone to force help on them. And trust me, I'm not saying this just because I've read a couple of books. Again, I've had an over 20-year law enforcement career in total. And I know it could be considered anecdotal, but the vast majority of physical confrontations, and I've said this on many occasions here on this channel, the vast majority of physical confrontations I've had throughout the course of my law enforcement career was with individuals who were mentally ill. It's just the reality of it. When I was working in I was a medical liaison officer in the county jail. I would assist the doctor, whether it's the medical doctor or the nursing staff or the psychologist or psychiatrist, when they would have someone in isolation, and it was 2C was the unit. And typically they were there because they were possibly under the influence of something and they were acting violently, or they were suicidal, or they were mentally ill. And not just slightly mentally ill, but mentally ill to the point to where they are a danger to themselves or someone else. And they would have to be on a isolation, 2 doors, locking them in. Oftentimes their clothing taken away, them given a suicide gown, a gown that you can't manipulate to tie around your neck if that situation fit. And the only way you made entry into that cell is if you had at least 2 people. And there were some people where you had to have more than that. And those are the only times, and then throughout the course of my career, whether it was when I was on the streets, patrolling the streets, when I worked in the prison, the county jail, I would dare say 70% of the physical altercations that I got into involved people who were mentally ill to some degree or another. More so than drunk people, as crazy as that may sound. More so than drunk people, it was the mentally ill. Now, am I saying that all mentally ill people are violent? Absolutely not. I mean, that would just be silly. That's completely irrational, because we know it has different degrees. Somebody could be suffering from a mild level of depression, and then you can have someone who's manic or someone who's schizophrenic and has multiple issues to go along with it. So, and it all varies. Are they taking their medication? Are they self-medicating by taking drugs or something along those lines? So many variables. But when it's all said and done, I always point back to the vast majority of my career, the vast majority of incidents have been with individuals who were mentally ill. So I want to share a few statistics that I found. And these statistics are, like I said, I had to search about not 50 pages. I'm exaggerating a little bit. But I had to go through many pages on Google past it, which is basically how you find anything valuable these days, because I found that almost anything else is propaganda or them sharing with you the things that they want you to see. And if you don't believe that, just do a little research on how Google gets down. They have a certain agenda that they're seeking to promote, and they're going to do everything that they can to get you to believe it. It's not like when you search something specifically, they're going to give you exactly what you want. They're going to give you what they want you to see. That's just the reality. So that's why I use various search engines like DuckDuckGo and things like that aren't as biased. But let me just share this article with y'all. Hopefully you can see it. This article is in reference to, let me see what the title of it is. Mental disorder and violence, is there a relationship beyond substance use? And it's $40 for the whole thing. So obviously I'm not going to pay for that. But I want to share with you some of the findings here in their conclusion. And they found, so SMI is severe mental illness or severely mentally ill. Those with SMI, irrespective of substance abuse status, were significantly more likely to be violent than those with no mental or substance use disorders. This finding held in both bivariate and multivariable models. Those with comorbid mental and substance use disorders had the highest risk of violence. So comorbid means you had something else along with it. Perhaps you were dealing with multiple mental health issues. You were bipolar and you were schizophrenic. And then he said, and substance use disorders had the highest risk. So if you have someone who's bipolar, schizophrenic, and they're a meth addict, you just got a bad combination, or alcohol, or whatever it may be. And even marijuana to some degree. And I know that's not really popular, but there's some research I've been doing lately on violence and marijuana. And I don't want to get too deeply into that, but there's some material that maybe if you guys see me on Facebook, I'll share it. I'll share a book link to the where I get that information from. But that's neither here nor there for now. Historical and current conditions were also associated with violence, including childhood abuse and neglect, household antisocial behavior, binge drinking, and stressful life events. And a lot of these situations, stressful life events, household antisocial behavior, that can be pretty broad these days. And then in conclusion, these results, in contrast to a recently published report, show that the NESARC data, I'll see what that means in a second, are consistent with the consensus view on mental disorder and violence. There is a statistically significant yet modest relationship between SMI, again, severe mental illness, and violence, and a stronger relationship between SMI with substance use disorder and violence. These results also highlight the importance of premorbid conditions and other contemporaneous clinical factors in violence and behavior. So even though it's popular these days for people to attempt to claim that those who are mentally ill aren't violent or less likely to be violent, that's just not the reality when the research is examined. When the research is when the situation when this whole situation is deeply examined, you can't get away with the reality that those who are mentally ill can be dangerous. Popular? Nope. But is it the reality? It absolutely is. So let's go back and talk about the video incident here without showing it again. For those of you who didn't see it, if you'd like to rewind closer to the beginning of the video, I actually show some edited footage of the actual stabbing, actual event that led up to the stabbing. I blur out the stabbing if you're just jumping on. But let's talk about the situational awareness incident. And I'm not trying to place any blame on Alison whatsoever. But again, do everything you can within your ability to try to pay attention to your environment. Was Peter Zazopoulos, that's the suspect, the killer, was he displaying any signs when he was walking down the street to show that he was a threat? If that was even the case, I don't know if he maybe came around a corner or something like that. She was caught off guard. She was clearly caught off guard. But was he demonstrating any unusual behavior? Could she have seen the weapon in his hand upon him walking towards her? It's possible. All I'm doing is just trying to bring up some potential circumstances to help you figure out how you can apply this to your everyday life. Because in law enforcement, we're consistently told, especially on the streets, that the hands kill. If you don't have any control over the suspect's hands, or at least a visual and see what's going on, then you're just in a bad spot right there. You have to maintain control over those hands. And I know that as an EMT, she may not have learned that. But then again, a New York EMT, I'm sure she's seen almost as she's arrived on some calls that started off being just a simple medical call, but then escalated into something greater. I'm sure that's happened over the course of her over 20-year career. Positive that happened. And she learned some things along the way. And again, this isn't trying to knock her or be critical of her. It's just pointing out the reality of life out there when you're dealing with people who are going through some form of a crisis. Again, possibly dealing with the mentally ill, when you're dealing with the criminal element, you just have to pay attention to these things. And if we go back also and see the time of day, this happened somewhere around 2 in the afternoon, Friday, just a couple of days ago. This whole thing went down, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And you see people driving by, and now on one end, if you see someone stabbing somebody and you're walking down the street in that city where they make it almost impossible for you to own a firearm, it would be pretty tough. Am I asking you just to dive in and tackle this guy? No, I'm not asking you to do that. And I'm glad that some people came back around and tried to intervene and at least try to get her some help. But at the same time, if you watch the video, she got stabbed so many times, it was literally like a slasher film. No chance whatsoever. Once she was on the ground, she seemed as if she was stunned. I mentioned this earlier. She seemed as if she was stunned from the contact falling down with that big old beast on top of her. And he was trying to stab her on the way down. On the way down. So did she have an opportunity to defend herself? No, not unless she had seen what was coming prior. At least that's the way I look at it. There have been many times where I'm walking down the street and I'll see someone who don't look right. Man, I'll go out of my way to get out of their line of travel. And then I'll watch them. This few days, I was in LA for a couple of days, just over the Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday and Thursday. I'm not from LA, but I know it's a mess. And I know you can walk a half a block from being in a nice spot. It's like here in Vegas or in any major city. You can walk a half a block in one direction. You could be in a nice area, and then you could be all up in the hood. So anytime I wanted to go to the store, instead of going to the instead of going to a fast food joint, I had a little kitchenette in my hotel room. So I went to the grocery store and bought some groceries so I can cook my own food, which was awesome. Saved a good amount of money, by the way, and got to eat what I know I can eat. Anyway, I took an Uber to get there. So round trip was like $20. And one of the Uber drivers who took me home was like, "Did you walk?" And to get there was about a good 2.5 miles. And I said, "No, I'm walking 2.5 miles in the direction that I don't know where I'm going. I'm not doing that." And he said, "Yeah, that was pretty smart." He said, "That's pretty smart because this area where the Ralph's restaurant, supermarket was," he said, "that's not a place that you want to just be walking around." And I didn't even know that going in. I just used some common sense that I developed over the years, especially being in law enforcement, that I'm not just going to go moseying around just because, it's 2 miles away, 2.5 miles away. I could walk there. That would just be being stupid. So the point of emphasis is when it comes to do the best you can, regardless of whether you're in a familiar location or whether you're in an unfamiliar location, do the best you can to be aware of your location, be aware of any potential threats around you, and do the best that you can to protect yourself. Now, there may not have been anything that woman could have done to protect herself. She could have walked inside the restaurant where she had ordered her food, or he could have followed her. Who knows? Who knows what was on this man's mind? But for those of us who are out there, let's be wise as we go about our business. Let's do everything that we can to protect ourselves. Now, another point that I want to bring up is the laws in the state of New York. And y'all, those of y'all who already know me, who've already followed my channel before, you know I am a big supporter of the Second Amendment and our individual right to bear arms and protect and to defend ourselves. Big supporter of that. And I knew it was difficult. Let me make this a little bit bigger while I'm talking. And I knew it was difficult to have a CCW in New York. But then, and I know things have changed as of late for the better. And I'm thankful for that, for those people up there. But when I was just reading through some of this stuff, where they allow you to carry, places you can't, man, oh man, I honestly believe, and I know people have different reasons why they can't leave or choose not to leave, living in certain cities. But man, oh man, the way things are getting in New York. Hold on, let me share this with y'all real quick. Let me remove this here and share something else with y'all. When I talk about how crazy things are getting in New York, it's like one of the main cities that I'm constantly talking about. All right, here we go. This is a Fox News report talking about the historic crime increase in certain cities around the nation. And I'll read it for you to help y'all see it. Violent crimes are on the rise in 6 of America's major cities and set to outpace the already historic levels of the 2021 violent crime. I think this report came out around a couple of months ago, maybe June or so. Baltimore, Los Angeles, and this isn't shocking to anybody who's been paying attention. Baltimore, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and New York City are all on pace to break the 2021 levels of violent crime halfway through this year. With the nation's largest city leading the group. According to crime data reviewed by Fox News, New York City has seen a 25.8% jump in violent crime at this point in 2022. And again, I think this came out in June or so, compared to the same time in 2021, despite seeing a small decrease in the amount of homicides recorded in the city. Violent crime, which is typically defined as a homicide, rape, assault, and robbery, had already been on the rise since 2020. Homicides have been one of the factors driving up the rates of violent crime, rising 30% from 2019 to 2020, and another 5% between 2020 and 2021. It's getting crazy out there, y'all. And I don't know if it's me because I report on this stuff and I see all the news reports. But I'd love to know if anybody out there who's listening, whether you're watching us have this discussion live right now or later on, anyone from New York, have you noticed anything? Have you noticed a crime increase? Do you feel any less safe? Please comment below. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. But considering how crazy things are getting there, man, it just seems so hard for me to really understand why anybody would want to stick around. And again, I know that there are variables that keep people where they are. I've had conversations with some of y'all on that topic already. So I definitely understand, and I'm compassionate to you. But man, oh man, it's just really heartbreaking. And it's so nuts. It's everywhere you turn. There's more crime. There's more shootings. More people getting shot. There are more people getting robbed, smash and grabs, people getting stabbed. It's all over. I don't even know. But let me share this one point with you when I'm talking about personal defense. And I'm a big advocate of us as individuals, especially in our current day and age, with things just seemingly getting only worse. I just pulled this up. Just wanted to do a little research to see how bad it is in New York to be able to defend yourself, be armed, purchase a firearm, and be a legal CCW carrier. So this is what I came across. New York has a quote unquote may issue policy for pistol licenses in the state. Local counties are in charge of issuing the permit based on discretion. Now, I don't know if this law here is still in effect, because I know there have been some changes and some people are actually trying to stop people from being able to protect themselves. For the average, everyday, law-abiding citizen, like how stupid is that? But I don't think half of these people really string together coherent thoughts in order to be able to chain together a good argument. The application process for New York CCW permit differs because there are various types of licenses issued by different counties, which makes it even more difficult. I mean, you got all kinds of hurdles you got to jump through. However, you must meet all requirements of the New York gun laws before you are allowed to apply for these permits. You can conceal carry in New York with the New York pistol license that serves as a state CCW permit. But you have to be at least 21 years old before you can make a New York concealed carry permit application, with the exemption to only members of the military. I'm a little torn on that one. To some degree, I can understand it being more mature. But again, when you talk about the military, you're talking about kids who are 17, 18 years old, who after a few months can end up in a combat zone. So it's kind of a tough sell for me, to be honest with you. But I do think training is important, definitely. Next, New York only issues permits to residents, per-time residents, and those whose place of employment is in the state. So I'm not sure if that means that if you work outside of New York, if you live in New York, but let's say you work in New Jersey, does that mean that you can't get a gun permit? If so, that's nuts, completely nuts. Next, there are also several local laws governing the possession of firearms in New York. Also, the state does require a firearm training before you can conceal carry. New York concealed carry permits are of various types, but the common one issued by most counties will allow you to possess your firearm in most places. Yeah, I don't know. But here's the update. As of August 25th, 2022, previously, you had to have a unique need for obtaining your concealed carry permit. However, in 2022, the Supreme Court overturned the Sullivan Act, which caused severe limitations for individuals looking to conceal carry in the state. Starting September 1st, which already went by, law-abiding citizens that have a gun storage solution and who seek out training will become eligible, or it says our training, will become eligible for a concealed carry license. This even includes areas of New York City. Now, here's like where you can carry and where you can't. New York does not have a reciprocity deal with any other state. Hence, it does not honor a CCW permit from states in the country. So you have to have a New York CCW. You can't come from somewhere else. Whereas most states, like I have one here in Nevada, and I think it covers 30 some different states. It says, yet you cannot possess a firearm within the territory of the state without validation. Other things that you should know about reciprocity in New York include the following. States that honor a CCW permit from New York can conceal carry with your New York CCW permit in these states. These are the 10 states. So it's like New York, I said Michigan. Well, they don't really have them here. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is what I wanted to get into right here. Places where you can't conceal carry in New York. Places where you can't conceal carry in New York. Now remember, you got all that violence you're dealing with, increasing crime rate, said murders are down slightly, but I don't know how does that compare to 2018, 2019. They were already going up, they said. You cannot conceal carry in buildings or within premises of schools, technical institutions, colleges, and universities. Now, these there's a lot of research out there, and it is found that these so-called gun-free zones are typically the ones that are hit most likely. So it doesn't seem to work from a rational perspective to say, hey, you know what? You can't carry a gun here. Because if I go into a school with the mindset that I'm going to shoot up the school, you honestly believe that I'm going to stop and change my mind because there's a law that says you can't carry a gun into a school? There's no rationality to the thought process here, y'all. You cannot conceal carry in places used for children, facilities, or daycare centers. Again, we should be able to protect the least of us. And here, again, they're not. You cannot conceal carry in state parks except when you are permitted to do so for hunting reasons. A state park. You got all the shrubs and bushes and people can hide any which way, but you can't conceal carry there. You are not allowed to conceal carry in places like Liberty Island and the Monument for the Statue of Liberty. You're not allowed to conceal carry in a campground meant for the general public, except during hunting in the spring season. You're not allowed to conceal carry in Zora Valley, I don't know what that is. You're not allowed to conceal carry in some specific areas of the Adirondack Mountain Reserve. You're not allowed to conceal carry in courtyards and courthouses. You're not allowed to conceal carry in a mental health facility, except you have permission from those in charge. You're not allowed to conceal carry in bars or restaurants that serve alcohol. You cannot conceal carry within government buildings and properties in some cities and counties. You can't do it in the airport. I mean, some of these are obvious, and I'm not saying I disagree with all of these, but I'm just reading what they have. You can't conceal carry within any city in New York, it says. You cannot conceal carry within any city in New York except you have a permit from the head police in that city. So does that mean, well, a CCW and a permit, or you need a specific permission from, I don't get it. You can't conceal carry in places that have signage or posts that prohibit the possession of firearms. Can't conceal carry in any place that the possession of firearms is not allowed by federal law. As of September 1st, 2022, Times Square is considered a gun-free zone. Times Square, all the craziness that goes on in Times Square, you can't conceal carry. Even with a license, you are not able to enter with a firearm unless specifically authorized by law. You see what I mean, folks? See what I mean? No, and I'm not saying I disagree with all that. And of course, if you're in Times Square and something goes down, the police are going to show up. Hopefully, if they can show up on time, the police might show up. But what if somebody's there? What if you have someone there, an active shooter? So you can't conceal carry. So you just have to let that person run loose. There's no way a citizen who can legally carry and legally protect themselves or protect the public. They're in the parks, state parks, restaurants that serve alcohol. Don't drink. If you're carrying, you're not supposed to drink. Just because they're serving it there, you can't carry. Irrational thoughts, y'all. Irrational thoughts by the gun control crowd. Doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. All right, let me go back and check out some of these comments. Going back to the actual incident of the video, she had no time to react at all. That dude was on her with a quickness. I wonder what was going through his head, honestly. Yes. 5 years, most start letting their guard down. I believe that, and I've seen it. Because after a certain amount of years, guys and girls officers start to develop a level of complacency. They start getting a bit overconfident. And before you know it, they're not being as careful in the jail. They're not doing their checks as much on patrol. They're not being as quick to watch the hands of the suspect. You can get jaded and get cynical, get complacent real quick. Like your last 30, good one, Lon. Hey, I appreciate that insight too, bro. I appreciate that. Like your last 30 days in the combat zone. And again, she had 6 months left to retire. 6 months. And I've seen on more than one occasion lately, over the last few years, where an officer was involved in a shooting, ended up getting gunned down, and they were very close to retirement. Very, very close. Months, less than a year, weeks. It's very sad. Yeah, I showed this one earlier. Here's a big boy. Here's a big boy. What's up, Paul? They always talk about mental illness. However, they almost always go after a weaker person. They know what they're doing. Good point, man. Good point. I never really thought about it. Because I've had little dudes come after me who are mentally ill. Guys smaller than me. Now, typically the dudes that were mentally ill that did come after me weren't small. Typically, they were not small. They were big guys. So maybe they thought they can take it. Maybe they thought I was weak, but unfortunately for them, they learned better. Suicidal blankets, and you needed officers who were capable of handling mentally ill persons. Absolutely. And that's a whole different topic when it comes to those who can actually communicate with them properly. Because developing that skill, it was something that I really wanted to hone and fine tune throughout the course of my career. I wanted to be a really good communicator. And I took pride in being able to de-escalate more than I took pride in being able to de-escalate more than I did by getting physical. It was like a win for me if I didn't have to snatch somebody up. Because like one, no paperwork and just easier for everybody. And but yeah, a lot of people, unfortunately, I can't say most officers. I'll be making generalizations and I don't want to do that. But there were a lot of officers who really didn't, they just thought they could talk to these people any old way. And you have to understand that there are ways that you can communicate, that you attempt to communicate with. But also on the flip side, some of these people, you can have you can have the nicest words and be as cool and calm as you possibly can be, and you could be the best orator and speaker, but they're so far gone that there's nothing that you could say that could make things any different. So that's definitely true. But she was about to retire, so she possibly thought it was a normal day for her going to get lunch like she normally does. Right. And you got to figure how many times did she go to lunch and nothing happened throughout the course of her career? How many times? Thousands, easily? I mean, of course, thousands, probably tens of thousands of times where she went to work and everything was good. And, I always often share the story with people that I think, honestly, if I'm honestly reflecting on my career, I think there was a time where I had developed a level of complacency. I would come to work, I would do my job, but I wasn't trying to be super cop or nothing like that or super CO. And I would come to work and I would do my job and, wouldn't take things as seriously as I should. Until one of my buddies that I went to the CO Academy with, he recommended this street survival course by Caliber Press. He recommended, it's like a 2 or 3 day class. I think it was a 2-day class. He recommended that class to me. And it talked about police uses of force, violent attacks on police officers, on COs. And man, I'm telling you, that class changed my life. It completely changed the path I went down in my law enforcement career. I was still working in the jail. A couple of years later, I decided, because I was pretty content working in the jail. But after that, watching that, I just kind of evolved as an officer. I just started wanting to gain as much knowledge and become as skillful as I could so that I could be in a position to where if something went down, I would be better equipped. So I ultimately ended up going out to the streets, became a defensive tactics instructor, did all my instructor courses, took instructor development, firearms, MACTAC or active shooter response instructor, DTI, you name it. I did that not only because I wanted to share my passion for training, which I always had pretty much, but it was heightened as a result of that class, and pass that on to other officers so that they could be better prepared for, the day where crap hits the fan and you're trying to figure out what to do and all hell's breaking loose around you, because that's a legit potential reality. So by the time when I went out to the streets, in the jail, you get familiar with your environment when you do it. When you first walk in there, man, it's like a sensory overload in the jail or in the prison system. But then but after doing that for 13 years, going out to the streets was like totally different. Also, it's like I had to learn even more, because now you have the whole environment. You have the world is a potential threat to some degree. And that may be a slight exaggeration, but you just never know where a shot could be coming from, or somebody could decide to drive their car into you or walk up to you saying, "Hey, officer, can you help me with something?" And next you know, you're in a gunfight. It just took what I had already known when it comes to security and situational awareness, is just escalated. And then as time goes along, you start to develop a level of comfort there, but you have to be very careful to not allow yourself to become complacent. And that's basically whatever any environment that you're in. Complacency can kill. And I'm not saying that assuming that she was complacent. I'm just making general statements that complacency can kill. And if you go to the same spot or one of your main hangouts to go eat and nothing ever happens, it's only natural. We're only human. Only human. There's only so much we can do before we start letting our guard down to some degree. It happens to everybody. You couldn't really see because he stabbed her behind the white car parked on the streets. You're talking about like on the streets? I think the guy in the scooter driving down, he did. I think he's the one that came back around and ultimately tried to tend to her. But man, I'm telling y'all, there was just really no hope for her. Because if you want to see the video, it's out there. But man, it was just savage. Savage. It was like freaking Michael Myers or something like that. Oh yeah, girl. I got buddies in Baltimore. Baltimore's been a hellhole for decades. But I know you had reasons why you plan on wanting to be out there, but my goodness. Yeah, that place right there. There's no way in the world you can catch me out there. Murder rate's been through the roof for decades. I'm surprised Chicago didn't make the list. Wasn't it on that list? It wasn't? I thought it was. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. But I think Chicago's just, it's just always high. It's just, every time you turn around, it's got one of the worst homicide rates in the nation. And I plan on doing like a few top 10 lists to talk about the crime, cities with the most crime, cities with the least crime, cities with the most homicides, least amount of homicides, robberies, so on and so forth. I plan on doing a series of videos to discuss those things. Isn't it nuts? Some people commute into New York for work. Yeah. And I just don't understand. I got one of my homies here. He is from New York. And yeah, Ray, we got to hook up, man. We definitely got to hook up again. I enjoyed when we were doing it a year ago, or was it 2 years ago? Honestly, time flies. And I was thinking about you today, man, when I was getting ready to report. And when I've been seeing all these reports going on, talking about New York, man, it's crazy, bro. And I'd love to have your insight. I think folks would love to hear your perspective on this. So it's wild, y'all. Yeah, everyone. In closing, just do the best you can. Pay attention to your environment. If it's in your ability, if you're in a location that is dangerous, and if it is within your ability to relocate, whether you're talking about physically or financially, then it would behoove you. I think it would definitely be a good thing to pick up and leave. I'm not saying it's simple and I'm not saying it's easy, but what price what's the price tag? What price can you put on your safety? Now, is it saying that wherever you go, things are going to be safe? Of course, there's always a risk. Of course not. There's always a risk of harm coming to you wherever you may live. But there's definitely some places that are worse than others. So take those things into consideration as you go about your everyday life. Push back on this narrative. Also, another top thing I want to talk about, push back on the narrative that the mentally ill people are only stigmatized. No, there is a legit concern out there for some people who are suffering from mental illness, who are mentally ill. Some of them can be dangerous, especially as mentioned previously, if you combine various other factors, substance abuse, other mental disorders. It's a real thing. It's a very real thing. And we have to push back against those people who are out there trying to make it seem as if, oh, they're fine, there's nothing to fear. And generally speaking, I agree, but we can't make that assumption that we can't have a blanket statement on everybody. We have to assess and evaluate each situation on a case-by-case basis, something that a lot of these folks don't understand. And in the meantime, y'all, especially for my Christian brothers and sisters out there, pray for the family. Pray for the family of Lieutenant Russo and her co-workers at the NYFD, the EMTs. I know it's going to be a hard time that they're going to have to be dealing with. And I really hope that people start to see things like this and we start to push back and we start to watch who we put in place to lead us, because the policies that are being promoted in a lot of these cities across the country, even though I know a lot of citizens are voting for these people, I'm hoping that people will start being wise enough to say, hey, you know what? This ain't working. We voted to defund the police. We pushed to defund we voted for whomever. And with knowing that they're going to try to defund the police, take the NYPD, about $500 million taken out of their budget over the last few years. Now, what's happening? All those cities that I just brought up, those 6 cities that I mentioned previously, every one of them has had an increase in crime. Every one of them. Crime skyrocketing. And what are they doing now? Oh, they're trying to rehire police, or they're trying to reallocate funds back into their police budget. But no common sense to begin with, none whatsoever. So push back on some of these policies and start to think about how you vote, y'all. Seriously, start to think about how you vote. The defund the police was a disaster. That movement was a disaster. And you have people walking around acting as if they never voted or never promoted that policy. And I don't know how many thousands of lives were lost as a result of that stupidity, period. So think about where you stop thinking about, stop just listening to the mainstream media, for one, with their lies and their distortions, always assuming everyone who's not a Democrat to be a racist. Examine the motives behind certain policies. If someone's not a supporter, for instance, of gun control, massive, these ridiculous levels of gun control, if you're not a supporter of that, it's not a racist thing. Because when we examine the actual numbers, we understand that the vast majority of people who are victimized by gun crime are Black and Hispanic people living in the hood, the vast majority of people. So how can that be racist when you want them to be able to have weapons so that they can defend themselves? It's completely irrational. How could it be, if you understand, once you understand that open borders opens our nation up to an increase in drugs, sex trafficking, all kinds of potential issues when it comes to the economy in our nation. And also when we understand, there was an LA Times article a few years back that mentioned how Black males who are low-skilled laborers are the ones who primarily suffer the most when illegal immigrants come into our country and take away jobs. So if I say that illegal immigration isn't a good thing, does that make me racist? Especially when all the data is examined and we see who it impacts and how the negative impact that it has on our country? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's just that for me, years ago, I just stopped listening to the mainstream media. I just stopped listening to them because I started seeing the fruit of what they stood for. And I saw the vast majority of it was completely unbiblical, and just irrational on so many levels. So just start thinking about these things, y'all. Start thinking long and hard about who you're trying to support and the consequences of that vote. And keep our country in prayer. But most importantly, keep our country in prayer because we need it. We have totally abandoned our faith in God. And we have become more and more secular. And a lot of the things that we struggle with these days are the fruit of that. So, well, once again, I appreciate y'all for joining me. And as always, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation.